John and Mike, oh here we go. Ready for the John and Mike Show. Topics made easy, caught in the flow. Let's dive in with John and Mike, yo.
Hey everyone, welcome back. You ready to jump into this?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. Today's deep dive, we're going to be tackling the gig economy.
Yeah, the gig economy.
Which you've been looking into.
I have, yeah. I've been diving deep into some articles and research on it, and it's,
Yeah.
there's a lot there.
So we're here to help synthesize all that and break down kind of what the biggest takeaways are.
Yeah, definitely a hot topic. Lots of buzz, both good and bad, surrounding the gig economy. So
Yeah,
hopefully we can cut through all that noise and figure out what it really means.
exactly.
Yeah.
So before we get into like all the specifics and details, let's just define what we even mean when we say gig economy, because it's more than just, driving for Uber or delivering food, right?
Right. It's definitely a much broader landscape than that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can think about freelance writing and editing, web design, virtual assisting,
Oh, sure.
even things like pet sitting and handyman services all fall under that umbrella.
Right.
And the common thread there is that they are all those short-term, project-based gigs, often found and managed through those online platforms.
Yeah, and you had highlighted in your notes, there was a story about, I think, a freelance graphic designer
Yes.
who basically transitioned from like their corporate life to running their own show completely online.
Yeah, completely online.
And that type of flexibility seems to be a huge draw for a lot of people, right?
Absolutely.
Like no more being chained to a desk from 9 to 5.
Yeah, I mean, that's the number one thing that appeals to people is that autonomy and control over their own schedules.
Yeah.
And I know in that story, the designer was talking about how they could actually structure their day around, picking their kids up from school, having that family time,
Yeah.
which is something that they just, couldn't even fathom in their previous job.
Right.
So it's a game changer, especially for, like you said, parents, caregivers, anyone who really needs that work-life balance. This allows them to do it.
Totally makes sense. But you also had flagged kind of on the flip side of that,
Yeah.
some concerns about that flexibility and the potential downside, which is the lack of stability,
Right.
Like no paid time off, no company health insurance.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the biggest downsides.
Yeah.
And one of the articles you shared, there was a study that said something like 70% of gig workers had experienced some kind of income volatility,
Wow.
which is huge. And so you couple that with, limited or no access to benefits, it creates a really high level of financial insecurity that a traditional 9-to-5 job would protect you from.
Wow, 70%. That's a huge number.
It's a big number.
That's a really big number.
Yeah.
And it really highlights those trade-offs that you're making, right?
Yeah.
But I'm also seeing like a theme emerge from the research that you've been doing, and that's that the gig economy is really pushing people to be incredibly adaptable.
Yes.
And entrepreneurial too.
Extremely entrepreneurial, yeah.
Right, because you have to be.
You have to be.
You are essentially like a small business owner.
Exactly. You are your own mini business.
Yeah.
And you are responsible for everything, marketing yourself, managing your money, all of it.
Yeah, you had pulled this fascinating statistic, I think it was from one of the reports, that something like 67% of gig workers had to acquire a new skill in the past year just to stay competitive.
It's wild, yeah.
It's wild.
It speaks to this idea that you have to be constantly learning and upskilling.
Yeah.
That's just part of being in the gig economy.
It's like this constant need to evolve just to stay ahead.
Yeah, and the people who really thrive in this environment are the ones who embrace that.
Yeah,
Always looking for new opportunities, new things to learn. Yeah, that's how you stay ahead of the curve.
totally. So where does this leave us then?
Right.
Is the gig economy the future of work, or is it just, leading down a path of instability?
It's the million-dollar question, right?
It really is, yeah.
I think in reality, it's probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
It offers that incredible freedom and flexibility that we talked about, but it also requires a ton of resilience, a ton of adaptability to deal with all of the uncertainty that comes with it. So it's less about it being good or bad and more about this fundamental shift in how we view work
Yeah.
and how we approach things like benefits and social safety nets and all of that.
It's really making everyone rethink those things.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, so much to consider.
Yeah.
And it leaves us with a lot of questions.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, how do we bridge the gap in social safety nets for gig workers?
Right.
Is there a middle ground where we can kind of like keep the best parts of traditional employment but embrace that flexibility?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? What really resonated with you through this whole deep dive?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I know, right?
It'll give us all something to think about.
It will. All right. Until next time.
John and Mike, oh here we go. Ready for the Jen and Mike show. Topics made easy, caught in the flow. Let's dive in with Jen and Mike, yo.